Get your black ass away from that table, boy. You're dirtying our air just by breathing it.
Officer Cody Rourke spat the words, and then he slammed the man's face straight into the steel lockers and poured a sticky energy drink over his head.
Look at you, soaked in garbage. You're nothing but a worthless, filthy parasite who snuck in through the back door.
The sticky liquid ran down his dark face and soaked his collar, while 5 officers roared with savage laughter. And in the doorway, Sergeant Wade Kroll leaned against the frame and sneered.
Clean that up, boy, and make sure you do it on your knees where you belong.
The man did not flinch. He did not scream. He did not fight. He simply closed his eyes, slowly wiped his skin, and memorized every single face in that room. They mistook his cold, deadly silence for weakness. It was the single worst mistake of their careers, and as the laughter rang out, Rourke leaned in close, grabbed his collar, and twisted it until the man choked.
Your dark skin makes me physically sick, dog. Get out of my station before I put you down myself.
What these crooked cops did not know was that they had just assaulted their brand new commanding officer and the department's first ever inspector general. He held every single one of their badges in the palm of his hand, and he was about to end all of them. Welcome back to the channel, where we expose corruption and bring you the ultimate stories of justice. Let us know in the comments below where in the world you are watching from today. Now, let's get right into how this investigation unfolded. To understand how 5 officers ended up standing in a federal courtroom, you have to go back to the beginning of that same week, to a Monday morning in a station that had rotted from the inside for a very long time. The East House smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax and 20 years of nobody opening a window. It always did. And nobody complained about it. Because complaining was not a thing you did at the East District Station of the Calder City Police Department. Not if you were smart. Not if you wanted your shift assignments to stay the way they were. Sergeant Wade Kroll stood in the center of the roll call room like he owned it. Because in every way that counted, he did. He had a coffee in one hand and his other thumb hooked in his belt. And he talked loud and easy. The way a man talks when it has never once occurred to him that people might not want to hear it. Cody Rourke sat closest to him. The way he always did. Officer Hank Pruitt sat 2 seats down, 52 years old and red in the face. A man so far gone into bitterness that the bitterness had stopped looking like bitterness and started looking like his whole personality. Officer Lena Ross sat at the end and laughed when it was time to laugh, because she had learned a long time ago that laughing along was the only reliable way to keep from becoming the joke herself. Kroll was 48, 23 years on the job, thick neck, permanent smirk, and the unshakable confidence of a man who has never once paid a price for anything. His name was not on the commander's door, but everyone in that building, from the newest rookie to the oldest desk sergeant, understood the truth of the East House. Wade Kroll ran it. And Wade Kroll had very particular opinions about who belonged in his station and who did not. And he was never shy about which officers he wanted gone. Captain Walter Pruitt had put in his papers 6 weeks earlier. Good old Walt, who never rocked a boat, and never once in 9 years told Wade Kroll no. In the 6 weeks since Pruitt cleaned out his office, Kroll had moved into the empty space like water flooding into a low place. He set the shift board himself. He killed 2 personnel memos out of the Human Resources office without a word of explanation. He had taken to calling himself the acting commander, casually, often, in front of people, and he held no such rank, and he did not appear to care. You know what Walt's whole problem was, Kroll said, swirling his coffee. No, spine. Man couldn't discipline a parking meter. He paused for the laugh. And he got it. New commander starts today, a duty officer said, passing through the doorway without stopping, without eye contact, The way you learned to move through that building, Kroll didn't miss a beat. Yeah, I know. He had done his homework on Elijah Booker the same way he did his homework on everyone. Pulled the file. Read it twice. Went looking for the soft places. Administrative track. No recent street time. No history in Calder City. No relationships inside the East House. A diversity hire. Kroll had decided. And he had seen the type 100 times. All paperwork and politics. No idea how a house like this one actually ran. They came in wanting to change things. And they left tired and beaten and asking themselves what had hit them. The East House had chewed up 3 commanders in 8 years, and Wade Kroll had helped with every single one. Desk man from downtown. He went on, warm with his own amusement. Probably can't fill out an incident report without a secretary holding the pen. The room laughed again. Pruitt leaned in. How long you give him? Kroll thought about it for exactly 1 second. 6 months. If he's tough? He smiled. He won't be tough. He raised his mug toward the middle of the room. A toast. Slow and deliberate. The kind that said, nothing changes here. Not today. Not ever. Rourke lifted his cup. Pruitt followed. Even Ross raised hers. Just slightly. Somewhere behind them. Through the side door off the parking bay. A door opened and closed, with barely a sound. Nobody noticed. Nobody turned around. Elijah Booker had spent his whole career watching men like Wade Kroll. He knew the way they filled a room. Loud and loose and completely certain of themselves. Right up until the floor came out from under them. He came in through the side door at 8:04 that morning and let it close behind him. He was not in uniform. No captain's bars. No collar brass. None of the press navy that would have announced him the instant he crossed the threshold. He wore plain gray work trousers, a dark blue polo, and a small generic patch on his left shoulder that read Contract Services in flat black letters, the kind of thing you saw on a man who came to fix the air conditioning, the kind of thing that made people's eyes slide right off him and on to the next thing. That was exactly the point. He took a tray in the cafeteria line, chose eggs and dry toast, poured himself a black coffee, and carried it to a steel table against the far wall. He sat down. He set a small notebook beside his tray. He picked up his fork, and then he simply watched. He was 55 years old, broad through the shoulders, with the specific stillness of a man who made his peace with difficulty a long time ago and stopped flinching at it. 29 years on the job. To 4 of them as a civil rights liaison to a federal task force, where being impatient got people hurt. He worked methodically. Badge numbers matched to faces he had memorized off personnel photos. Who deferred to whom? Who sat alone? Who laughed a little too carefully? The loud table by the windows confirmed everything the file had told him. Kroll's crew. Rourke. Pruitt. Ross. And the others. The whole architecture of the problem. Right there in the open, 3 months earlier. Deputy Chief Miriam Osei had pushed a thick folder across her desk without a word. And Elijah had read every page while she waited. 9 dismissed complaints in 5 years. 4 officers who had asked for transfers rather than fight. A paper trail full of holes where real records should have been. And near the bottom, a young officer named Andre Whitfield, 30 years old, top of his academy class, assigned to the East House, full of purpose, by his 3rd month, the worst patrol sectors in the district. By his 5th, written up for things white officers did in the open every single day. By his 8th, gone, a 2-sentence resignation, and a man who folded his uniform into a box and tried, for 3 years and 7 months, to forget the whole thing had ever happened. Elijah had closed the folder slowly and looked up. Osei had not touched her coffee since he sat down. "Tell me about him," Elijah had said. "Not the file. Tell me what the file doesn't say." Wade Kroll is not stupid. That's the first thing you have to understand. He looks like a loud, small man, and that makes people underestimate him. They stop paying attention. That is precisely what he wants. She folded her hands. He spent 23 years building a machine inside that station. Officers who owe him. Officers who fear him. Officers who've done things they'd rather nobody ever looked at too closely. He holds all of it. Right here, she touched 2 fingers to her temple, and outside the station, Harlan Foss. She said the name like a headache that would not quit. City councilman. Chairs the Public Safety Budget Committee. Any move against Kroll that makes noise at the city level gets complicated fast. 3 commanders in 8 years complicated. She held his gaze. He won't come at you head on. He'll bury you in paperwork. He'll go to the union. He'll use Voss to put noise in the press. And he'll stand in the middle of all of it with clean hands. And that smile of his, he's done it before. Andre Whitfield. Elijah said quietly. Something moved in her face. Andre Whitfield had more in him than anyone we put through that house in a decade. He rotates tires at a brake shop off the interstate now. Won't return my calls. Elijah had looked at the folder one last time. Then he looked up. Give me 1 week. Now he sat in their cafeteria, eating their eggs. And he was still in the way that very calm, very dangerous people are still. Not passive. Not idle. Coiled. Waiting for exactly the thing he already knew was coming. He was almost through his breakfast when a chair scraped back from the window table. Cody Rourke stood up, nudged Pruitt, and tipped his head toward the man at the far wall. Somebody let the janitor into the good cafeteria, he said. And the table laughed. Rourke did not cross the room to start a fight. That was not the point. The point was the audience. The point was the officers watching him walk over with that loose grin on his face. The point was Wade Kroll in the doorway with his coffee, watching the whole thing with quiet approval. Rourke was the kind of man whose cruelty did not feel real to him unless somebody was watching it happen. He reached the end of the table and stopped. He picked up a can of energy drink off the counter. 1. Somebody had left half warm, and held it loose between 2 fingers. Get your black ass away from that table. Boy, he said, you're dirtying our air just by breathing it. The service doors around back. That's where your kind comes in. And then he put a flat hand on the back of Elijah's head and slammed his face into the steel lockers hard enough to rattle the whole row. And he tipped the can over his head. Slow, letting it run down through his hair and over his face and down the back of his collar. Look at you, Rourke said, soaked in garbage. Nothing but a worthless, filthy parasite who snuck in through the back door. The window table exploded. Pruitt slapped the table so hard the coffee cups jumped. 2 officers doubled over. Ross pressed a hand to her mouth. Not from shock, but from the effort of holding in how hard she was laughing. 5 of them, laughing like it was the best thing they had seen all year. Kroll, in the doorway, did nothing at all. He just smiled. Clean that up, boy, Rourke said, and make sure you do it on your knees, where you belong. Elijah went completely still. Not the stillness of a man in shock. Not the stillness of a man who was afraid. Something else entirely. Deep and deliberate. And somehow far more unsettling than any reaction could have been. His eyes stayed on his tray. He set the fork down. He closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then he pulled a napkin from the dispenser and brought it to his face, wiping the sticky off his skin. Slow and careful. The way a man wipes his hands clean after finishing a job. on the inside of his right forearm, where the locker edge had caught him. A red welt was already coming up dark under the skin. He noted it the way he noted everything. He did not rub it, and then, because the audience was still watching, and Rourke could not help himself, he leaned in close and grabbed a fistful of Elijah's collar and twisted it tight against his throat until the older man's breath caught. "Your dark skin makes me sick." "Doe," Rourke said, low and vicious, close enough that only the front row heard it. "Get out of my station before I put you down myself." For one long moment, Elijah could not breathe. And he did not struggle. And he did not look away. He simply held Rourke's eyes with a flat, patient steadiness that had no fear in it anywhere. Then Rourke let go, laughing, and stepped back, and spread his hands wide for the room like a man who had done something worth doing. Elijah folded the napkin in half and set it beside the tray. He touched his own throat once, testing it, and something cold and permanent settled behind his eyes. He looked up, not with anger, not with embarrassment, with something far quieter than either. He read the name off the tape on Rourke's chest, and then he looked directly into the man's eyes. "I know where the service door is," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, and only a little rough from the choking. "Enjoy your breakfast, Officer Rourke." The grin flickered. Just for a second. Just the briefest hitch. Like a man who hears a sound he cannot quite place. He had not told this man his name. "Patch on your chest," Elijah said, before Rourke could ask. But that was not a thing a janitor read off you. Not like that. Not that easy. The moment passed, and the table was still laughing. And Rourke sauntered back to his chair, and Kroll pushed off the doorframe and disappeared down the hall. Satisfied, Elijah reached into his shirt pocket and took out the notebook. He opened it to a clean page and wrote one word: Rourke. Then he capped the pen and slid the notebook back into his pocket. Across the room, alone at a table by the opposite windows, Officer Renata Vaughn sat with a cup of coffee she had not touched. 4 years at the East House, she had watched the whole thing without moving. She was not laughing. She was not looking away. Either, she was watching the man at the far wall with a focused, careful expression, the look of a person trying to solve a problem when they do not yet have all the pieces. Elijah felt her watching. He met her eyes across the room for half a second, and then he looked back down at his eggs. And he finished them. An hour later, the whole department was told to report to the roll call room. Nobody knew why. Kroll assumed it was a welcome speech for the new commander, and he had already decided to be late to it. Just to make a point about who really ran the East House, the roll call room filled the way it always did. Loud near the door, quiet toward the back. Kroll's crew took their usual 3 seats. Center left, close enough to the front to look engaged without being engaged. Coffee cups scraped the long table. Somebody's radio crackled and got turned down. Nobody paid much attention to the man already standing at the front. Same gray polo. Same contract services patch. Hands loose at his sides. Not checking his phone. Just standing there in the quiet way certain people stand. Taking up exactly the space they need, and not 1 inch more. Rourke glanced at him and looked away. He leaned toward Pruitt. "Why's the janitor in our roll call?" Pruitt shrugged without interest. "Probably the parking lot cameras." "Ignore him." Rourke did. It was the polo that did it. The absence of a real uniform. People see what they expect to see. And nobody at the East House expected anything that morning, except the same thing they got every morning. Kroll came through the door with 2 minutes to spare. He did his usual scan of the room. Attendance. Posture. The order of things. And his eyes crossed the man at the front, without stopping. He set his coffee down. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table. He was just about to sit when the side door opened again, and the room changed, not because of a sound or a word. It changed the way a room changes when someone walks in who outranks every person present. A quiet, involuntary shift, like a current running under the floor. Side conversations stopped mid-sentence. Somebody straightened. Somebody put a phone face down. Deputy Chief Miriam Osei walked to the front in full dress uniform, shoulders square, and stood beside the man in the gray polo. Kroll's hand was still on the back of his chair. He did not sit down. Osei looked at no one in particular. She simply waited. And the waiting itself was a kind of pressure, clean and steady. She had done this before. She was in no hurry. The room reached full silence in about 10 seconds. Rourke's eyes moved from the man to Osei and back, looking more carefully this time, at the quality of his stillness, at the fact that he was meeting nobody's eyes because he did not need to. Something cold moved through his chest. He thought about the locker room, the can, his own hand around the man's throat, the way the man had looked up at him. Not scared, not embarrassed, just steady, and said, "Officer Rourke," like the name had already been filed somewhere inside him. His jaw tightened. Osei let the silence run exactly as long as she wanted. Then she spoke. "Officers of the East District, I'll keep this brief." She turned slightly toward the man beside her. After a selection process conducted over the past 3 months, the East House has a new commanding officer, effective this morning. Captain Elijah Booker, 29 years of service. Former civil rights liaison to a federal task force. 3 department commendations for integrity and command. She let it land. And one more thing you'll want to hear. As of this week, Captain Booker holds a second appointment. He is this department's first Inspector General, a standing authority that reaches every house, every unit, and every rank in this city. Her eyes moved, almost imperceptibly, toward the window table crew. And I understand several of you have already had the chance to meet him this morning. The silence that came next had weight, and it pressed down hard on specific people. Rourke felt the blood leave his face. Pruitt's jaw went slack. Ross looked up, and then immediately back down. Kroll said nothing and did nothing, and his expression stopped being an expression and became a careful, rigid blankness. The face of a man performing composure, while the floor drops out from under him. Osei stepped aside. "I'll let him take it from here." Elijah Booker walked to the front, set both hands on the edges of the lectern, and looked out over the room. He did not look like a man who had just been revealed. He looked like a man who had been waiting for the right moment to step forward. And the moment had come, exactly on schedule. He found Rourke first, and held his eyes for 2 long seconds. Then Pruitt. Then Ross. Then last, and longest, Wade Kroll. Nobody made a sound. "Good morning. I've already had a chance to get acquainted with a few of you." He let it stand a moment. "I look forward to getting to know the rest of you properly over the coming days." He did not smile. He opened the folder in front of him and moved straight into the briefing. Shift assignments. Patrol updates. 2 case reviews. Thorough and precise, and entirely at ease. Running it the way a man runs something he has done 100 times. Nobody said a word that wasn't asked of them. When it was over, the room emptied fast. Officers moving with their eyes down. In the back row, Renata Vaughn let out a long, slow breath. Her first full breath all morning. Kroll hung back until the others filtered out. Then crossed the room with a different walk than the one he had at 8. Slower, more measured. He had recalibrated somewhere between the door and the lectern. and what he wore now was a performance of ease. He put out his hand. Captain Booker. Warm. Practiced. Wade Kroll. Been keeping the wheels on since Walt retired. Wanted to introduce myself proper. Elijah looked at the hand. Then he shook it. Sergeant Kroll. I know who you are. Something moved behind Kroll's eyes. Brief and quickly buried. Good. Good. Just want you to know, I'm here to help. 6 weeks running this place solo. I've got a real handle on how things work. The relationships, the rhythms. I'd be glad to bring you up to speed. Elijah nodded once. I appreciate that. Sergeant, I'll call on you when I need you. Kroll's smile held perfectly steady. Of course. Doors always open. He left. Elijah watched him go. Then turned back to his folder and made a small, quiet note. 20 minutes later, Kroll found Rourke by the equipment lockers. Relax, he said. Before Rourke could open his mouth, he shook my hand. Smiled. Didn't say one word about this morning. Mensa Pushhor came in wanting to look reasonable. He is not going to blow up his first week over a spilled drink. Rourke's voice was low. I put my hands on him. Wade. I had him by the throat. For just a second, something crossed Kroll's face. Then he shrugged it off. You encountered an unidentified individual in a staff-only area, and you responded to a security concern. That's the whole story. You do not apologize. You do not so much as mention this morning. Anybody asks, you keep your mouth shut and you let me handle it. He clapped Rourke on the shoulder. We play it calm. We play it normal. And he spends his first 3 months drowning in paper, wondering why nothing works the way he expects. Just like the last 3. Rourke exhaled. Kroll walked off, smiling again. But the smile did not go all the way to his eyes anymore. At 2 o'clock, Elijah leaned out of his office door. Officer Vaughn. My office. Please. She stood, smoothed her uniform, and followed him in. He shut the door, angled the blinds closed, and lifted a thick manila folder from the bottom drawer, held shut with 2 rubber bands. Sit down. She sat. He nodded at it. She peeled off the bands and opened it. And she went still. Inside was everything. Photographs of incident reports. Complaint forms with big red dismiss stamps. Personnel records with notes in the margins. A timeline running back 6 years. Andre Whitfield's file. Flagged with a yellow tab. Names she recognized. Dates she recognized. Things she had seen with her own eyes and told herself nobody was writing down. All of it written down. I've been building this for 3 months. Elijah said, before I ever set foot in this building. This morning was part of it. You watched what happened in the cafeteria. It was not a question. Yes, she said quietly. I watched him choke you. You did. She looked up at him. And you let him. You could have put him on the floor. I've read your record. You could have put all 5 of them on the floor. You let it happen. I needed it to happen where people would remember it. Elijah said. And I needed to know exactly who laughed. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing that. Then he slid a smaller document across the desk. I need someone inside this house who has seen what I've documented and can confirm it from direct experience. That's a formal internal affairs cooperation agreement. It protects you legally, and it places your account on an official record. She looked at it, then up at him. They'll know. If I start talking, Kroll will figure it out. Eventually, Elijah said. That's why the case has to be airtight before he does. She looked down at the agreement. How long have you been doing this, coming into places like this? This is my fourth posting like this one. I've never lost. She picked up the pen. Through the angled blinds, just barely visible, Wade Kroll stood motionless in the bullpen. Watching the closed office door, his smile was completely gone. The next morning, Tuesday, came in gray and cold. Elijah was at his desk by 7:15. Coffee made. Duty roster reviewed. 3 case files open before half the building had their coats off. He moved through the station the way he always did. Quietly. Attentively. Missing nothing. Kroll watched him do it. And then Kroll got to work. It started small. That was how Kroll always started. By 8:15, the station's internal mail routing had been quietly adjusted. Reports that should have landed straight on the commander's desk, now cycling through a second approval step Kroll had inserted. To smooth the transition. Nothing anyone could point at and call sabotage. Just enough friction to keep the new man buried in paper for hours a day. By 9, he had made 2 friendly calls to the union rep. A soft-spoken man named Sean Duffy, who owed him 3 favors and knew it, suggesting, gently, that the commander's plainclothes Monday visit might be worth a look from a protocol standpoint. Just making sure the union's aware, he said. Duffy said he would look into it. Kroll hung up satisfied. What Kroll did not see was what was happening on the other side of the building. Elijah had scheduled individual orientation meetings with every officer in the house. 33 people over 2 days. 15 minutes each. Framed as a simple introduction. That was how it looked from outside. From inside, each one was something else. He asked the same careful questions of every officer. What was working? What wasn't? What they wished leadership understood. Most of the senior officers gave him nothing. Polite. Closed. Practiced. They had learned to give nothing. The junior officers were different. A 26-year-old named Officer Camille Boyd came in for 15 minutes and left after 40, speaking carefully at first, then not carefully at all, describing her first 6 months in a steady voice with her hands clasped tight in her lap. Missed promotions with no explanation. A complaint filed 8 months back that never got a response. A shift schedule built to isolate her. Elijah listened without interrupting, took quiet notes, and told her she had done the right thing. She looked at him like she was not sure yet whether to believe it. She was the 4th officer to give him something real. By the end of Tuesday, she was one of 9. That evening, he sat alone with his encrypted tablet and his notebook. 14 names now. 5 documented incidents. Dates and witnesses attached. A clear picture of a machine that had been running in the dark for a very long time. He cross-referenced everything against the dossier. The patterns lined up exactly. Complaints filed and vanished. Officers who left without a word. Andre Whitfield, at the center of it all. Like a wound nobody ever treated. Kroll thought he was poisoning the well. What he was actually doing was buying the new man time. Late that night, long after the building had gone quiet, Elijah pulled Andre Whitfield's file and read it again. Not as preparation this time, but sitting inside the building where it had happened. The pattern was surgical. A write-up for missing paperwork on a day Andre had been working a double, covering an absence Kroll himself approved. A vague insubordination charge with no witnesses named. A 3-page complaint in month 10. Reviewed by Sergeant Wade Kroll. Marked insufficient evidence. Dismissed. And Andre never notified. The required in-person delivery never signed for. Kroll had buried it without leaving a fingerprint. A transfer denied in 48 hours. A 2-sentence resignation. The file ended there. He turned to a fresh page and began a clean summary of every incident. Dates. File references. Cross-references. the kind of documentation that could not be waved away. He thought about calling Andre that night and decided against it. The case was not strong enough yet, and bringing him in early meant exposing him before the protection was in place. When he made that call, the ground under Andre's feet needed to be solid. He owed him that. He worked until 9, locked the file away, and walked out through a building that had no idea what was coming. Wednesday morning brought a hard frost. By noon, Elijah was reading through the backlog of misrouted reports when Ose called, "Turn on the local channel." Now, Kroll had made his own call at 8:05. From the far corner of the parking lot, where the outdoor cameras did not reach, collar up against the cold. Back to the building. He had dialed Councilman Harlan Voss's private cell. "We have a problem," Kroll said, and laid it out over 11 minutes. Booker's appointment, the cafeteria incident, framed his way. The one-on-one meetings that were clearly not just orientation. The cooperation agreement he suspected was circulating. Vaughn spending 45 minutes behind a closed door on day 1. "I need noise," Kroll said. "Public noise. Something that makes him look like the problem before he can make me the problem." Voss was quiet a moment. "Leave it with me." Councilman Harlan Voss was 61, silver-haired, and wore the polish of a man who had spent 3 decades making problems disappear for the right people. He chaired the Public Safety Budget Committee. The East House's money ran through his hands every fiscal year. He and Kroll had an arrangement that was never written down and never needed to be. Kroll kept the East running quietly, without the headlines that spawned oversight committees, and Voss kept the money flowing, and the questions few. Booker threatened to make it very messy. By noon, Voss had a public safety accountability forum scheduled for that evening. Invitations sent through the city council's official channels to give it the shine of legitimacy. By 6, the local channel had a camera crew in the room. Elijah watched from his office. Volume low. Voss stood at a lectern before a half-filled room, his expression éclaté, arranged into something resembling civic concern. And with the practiced ease of a man who had been planting suggestions his whole life, he raised his concerns about the process that had produced the East District's new commander. "Our community deserves leadership with deep local roots," he said, straight into the camera. "Not appointments made in back rooms by people with agendas." He never said Elijah's name. He did not have to. The banner across the bottom of the screen read, "Questions surround the new East District commander." Elijah turned the television off and called Ose. "Voss chairs the budget committee," she said before he could speak. "Politically untouchable right now. A direct run at him makes more noise than it solves. He's trying to delegitimize you before you build traction. Make you the controversy so nobody looks at Kroll." "I know," Elijah said. "So for now, nothing." He hung up, opened his notebook, and at the top of a fresh page wrote 2 words, "Political infrastructure." Beneath it, Harlan Voss. Voss thought this was about a job title, a bruised ego, an appointment he wanted reversed. He had no idea what was actually inside the folder in the locked drawer, or how long it had been building. Elijah capped his pen and went back to work. That same night, near 11, with a skeleton crew on the overnight desk and the hallways dim, Renata Vaughn sat alone at a records room terminal with a cup of cold coffee and a growing sense of unease. On paper, she was running a routine records audit, a task nobody looked at twice. In practice, she was working backward through 6 years of filed complaints, cross-referencing dismissal dates, reviewer signatures, routing logs. Every thread ran to the same place. She had been at it 2 hours when she stopped and texted Elijah 3 lines about what she was finding. He came in quietly through the side door. Civilian clothes, no announcement, and read over her shoulder in the dim light. 6 years of complaints. The same reviewer on nearly every one. The same signature. The same 3-word dismissal. Insufficient évidence. He did not need to say much. Document all of it exactly as you found it. He said finally, dismissal dates, reviewer signatures, routing logs, file paths. We build it so airtight nobody can wave it away. He handed her back her phone. You did the right thing tonight. They walked out through the side door into the lot. And the cold hit them. Renata stopped. Both front tires of her car were flat. Not slowly deflated. Slashed clean. Deep and deliberate. There's no camera on this corner, she said quietly. No, Elijah said. There isn't. He photographed the tires methodically. Close. Wide. The surrounding lot. Then called the city fleet manager's emergency line to request a camera at the northeast corner. On the record. They're guessing, he said. They don't know what you've told me. A warning based on suspicion. Not information. Does that make it better? He met her eyes. No. It makes them sloppy. And sloppy people leave marks they can't walk back. He drove her to her sister's place. Neither of them said much on the way. Thursday felt different. The moment Elijah came through the front door at 7:20. The kind of shift you feel before you can name it. Officers who had kept their eyes down all week made brief, direct contact as he passed. A junior officer held the equipment room door for him without being asked. The knot around Kroll's corner of the bullpen was thinner. The orbit looser. Small things. But Elijah had built a career out of reading small things. He set 2 folders on his desk. The completed internal affairs referral, 41 pages. Fully documented. Cross-referenced. Airtight. And a sealed envelope addressed to Deputy Chief Osei. He squared them and went to run the briefing. Kroll showed up but had nowhere to stand. Elijah ran the briefing, the way he had run everyone that week. Clean. Direct. Thorough. Asking specific questions of specific officers and listening to the answers in full. Kroll tried to interject twice. Elijah acknowledged both with a brief nod and continued without incorporating either. By the end, Kroll looked like a man sitting in a chair that had been moved 3 inches to the left of where it used to be. Nothing dramatic, just wrong enough to feel. 3 officers stopped Elijah in the hallway afterward. Separately, one after another, each finding a quiet stretch of empty corridor. The first was Officer Sam Igioma, 24, 6 months on the force, who spoke fast and low like a man who had been working up to it for days. Assignments built to make him fail. Impossible quotas. Inadequate backup. Write-ups that turned up in his file without warning. He had never filed a complaint. He had not known if there was any point. The second was Officer Gwen Alvarez, 10 years on the job, who handed Elijah a folded copy of a complaint she had filed 2 years back, routed personally to Kroll and never heard of again. The third said only 3 sentences, asked for nothing, and walked away. Elijah added all of it to the file. Osei arrived at noon, unannounced, through the back entrance in a gray coat with a leather portfolio under her arm. He met her in his office, shut the door, and slid the referral across the desk. She read it the way she read everything, thoroughly, without expression, turning each page with the same controlled attention. 22 minutes. When she finished, she closed the folder and set it flat. This is enough, she said. I know. I can have suspension paperwork drawn up tonight. We move on Kroll first thing tomorrow. Badge. Sidearm. Administrative hold pending full investigation. The harassment record goes to Human Resources and the union at the same time. He won't see it coming. No, Elijah said. He won't. She studied him. How are you doing? He considered the question. Ask me Friday afternoon. She almost smiled, gathered the referral into her portfolio, and stood. First thing tomorrow. After she left, he sat alone a few minutes. Then he sealed the referral envelope, locked it in the bottom drawer, and turned the key. Outside the glass, across the bullpen, Wade Kroll stood completely motionless, watching the office door. Elijah turned off his lamp and went back to work. His phone rang at 11 minutes to 10 that night. He was still at his desk. The building dark, except for his lamp and the blue glow of the overnight dispatch terminal down the hall. Elijah. Osei's voice was different, clipped, controlled in the specific way of someone managing very bad news with both hands. We have a problem. He set down his pen. Tell me? She talked for 9 minutes. He listened without interrupting, one hand flat on the desk, eyes fixed on the middle distance, not reacting, not catastrophizing. The shape of it came clear fast. Kroll had moved first. Sometime between the morning briefing and noon he had reached Voss, who spent the afternoon working the city level, calling in debts through channels that never showed up in any record. By late afternoon, the deputy commissioner's office had quietly signed a restructuring order. The internal affairs unit slated to receive Elijah's referral pulled and reassigned to a district reorganization project. Administrative language buried in routine paperwork, signed on a Thursday when nobody was watching. The replacement unit was the North Side Division, which had a history with the East House. 3 complaints referred in 4 years. 3 findings of insufficient evidence. Clean every time. There's more? Of course there was. Someone tipped Kroll about the referral. He filed a formal union grievance this afternoon. Claims your Monday observation. Plain clothes. Failing to identify yourself. Constituted deliberate psychological manipulation and undue stress for department personnel. He's calling it entrapment. He's calling my first day on the job entrapment. Elijah said flatly. He's calling it whatever word makes the union move fastest. Another pause. Heavier. Elijah. Pruitt and Ross signed supporting statements. 4 officers total. The grievance is filed. The union is backing it. And Voss's brother-in-law is the deputy commissioner, Gordon Pike. There it was. The full shape of it. The deputy commissioner himself. Connected by blood and aligned by interest. Signing the paperwork that surgically removed the one channel built to receive everything Elijah had put together. By tomorrow, Voss would be on the news calling for a review of the appointment. The union citing the grievance publicly. The commissioner backing them both. Elijah looked at the sealed envelope in his drawer. 41 pages. 6 years of documented abuse. Every complaint. Every buried transfer. Every name. Every date. All of it real. All of it thorough. All of it completely useless without a legitimate channel to receive it. Kroll had not beaten the evidence. He had beaten the system that was supposed to process it. Go home. Osei said quietly. Get some rest. We'll figure it out tomorrow. Yes, he said. Good night, Miriam. He hung up and sat in the lamplight a long time. The referral 12 inches from his right hand. The same envelope he had sealed hours ago. Certain tomorrow would be the beginning of the end. He had been right about that. Just not the way he had expected. He turned off the lamp. In the dark of an empty building, with a case that could not currently be filed, Elijah Booker sat very still and thought. Then he picked up his phone and scrolled to a number he had not yet dialed. Andre Whitfield. His thumb hovered. He pressed call. Andre picked up on the 4th ring. His voice thick with sleep, and something older than sleep. a weariness that had settled in the way things do when they have been there long enough to stop feeling like a choice. "Hello, Andre." Elijah kept his voice quiet and steady. "My name is Elijah Booker. I'm the new commander at the East House." Silence. Not the silence of a man who had fallen back asleep. The silence of a man who had gone very still on the other end of the line. "I've read your file." Elijah continued. "All of it. Every complaint. Every write-up. Every date. I know what they did to you in that building." The silence stretched. Then Andre said, "I wondered when somebody would finally call." They talked for 2 hours. Elijah sat at his kitchen table in the dark. Coffee going cold. Notebook open. And listened the way he had trained himself to over 29 years. Completely. Without rushing. Andre talked slowly at first. Then less carefully. The commendations. The letter from the elementary school principal. The genuine belief he had found the place he was meant to be. Then what came after? The reassignments? The write-ups that appeared like ambushes. The vanished complaint. The transfer denied in 48 hours. In the morning, he sat in his car outside the station for 45 minutes and then drove home instead of going in. "I kept journals," Andre said. Elijah looked up from his notebook. "What kind of journals?" "Personnel, honest. Dated. Every incident. Every conversation. Every time something happened I knew was wrong. I wrote them because I didn't know what else to do with it. I couldn't sleep." His voice was flat and factual. A man describing something he had processed 1,000 times. "I never filed them. I didn't think anyone would listen." "I'm listening," Elijah said. Another silence. Longer. "I've got a son. He's 6. His name is Theo." He stopped. "I need you to tell me this is real. That something's actually going to happen this time. That I'm not just. It's real." Elijah said, "But I need to ask you something difficult. I need you to come back to the building. Tomorrow morning. In uniform." He waited. "I know what I'm asking." The silence was the longest yet. "You want me to walk back in there?" Andre said quietly. "In front of all of them?" "Yes." Elijah heard him breathe once. "Slow. In and out. Tell me what you have." Andre said. Elijah told him. Not everything. Not the operational details. Not the names he was protecting. But enough? The dossier. 6 years of suppressed complaints. The scope of what was coming. When he finished, Andre was quiet a moment. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay. Tell me what time." Elijah hung up and sat with the phone in his hand. It was 2:47 in the morning. And somewhere in that stillness, turning the whole thing over, looking for the door that had to be there, he found it. He had been staring at it all night without seeing it. Kroll and Voss had not just protected themselves. To do it, they had reached into a live civil rights matter and moved the pieces. The deputy commissioner had signed an order pulling an internal affairs unit off a case involving racially targeted harassment and the suppression of federal complaints, interfering with an active civil rights inquiry, even through bureaucratic maneuvering, even with clean hands and administrative language, was not a city matter. It was a federal one. They had not buried the case. They had built the weapon that would kill them. He opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he had added 3 months earlier and hoped he would not need this soon. Diane Okafor, United States Department of Justice. Civil Rights Division. He had sent her the preliminary dossier as a precaution back in the fall. When the shape of what he was walking into came clear, he had not been certain the case would ever reach federal ground. He was certain now. He pressed call. She picked up on the second ring. She had been awake. "Elijah," she said simply. The Internal Affairs Unit was pulled tonight. Signed by the Deputy Commissioner. Voss's brother-in-law. A pause. Brief and precise. That's obstruction. Yes. Of a federal civil rights inquiry. Yes. He heard the click of a lamp. The sound of paper moving. The door just opened. Okafor said. Elijah looked out his kitchen window at the dark. Empty street. Be at the East House at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Use the front entrance. We'll be there. He hung up, closed his notebook, and did not sleep. Friday morning. Elijah arrived at 7:45 in full dress uniform. Captain's bars bright. Every crease sharp enough to cut. He walked through the front entrance with his shoulders back, went straight to the roll call room, and stood at the front, and waited. He did not pace. He did not check his watch. He stood the way he had stood his whole career, like a man who had already decided how things were going to go and was simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. Officers began filtering in at 8. In pairs and clusters, coffee in hand, still half asleep. One by one, they registered him at the front in full dress. The conversations dropped off, and the room filled in quietly. Kroll arrived at 8:20, carrying confidence like a weapon. Back-channel word had reached him through the union. The removal review was set for 10. Voss ready to make a statement at noon. He expected to walk into a room with a cornered man at the front of it. He found Elijah Booker standing at the lectern like he owned the building. Because he did. Kroll took his seat, his face giving away nothing. But Elijah watched his eyes make a quick reassessment. The room, the uniform, the posture, and come up uncertain for the first time all week. Good. At 8:25, Renata Vaughn took a seat near the back and glanced at Elijah. He gave her nothing. But she understood. At 8:28, Deputy Chief Osei entered in full dress and positioned herself to the right of the lectern without a word. And several officers straightened involuntarily. At 8:30, Elijah heard the front door of the station open. The room did not hear them coming. It felt them, a change in the air near the hallway entrance, like pressure shifting ahead of a storm. Then the roll call door opened, and 3 people walked in displaying federal credentials. Diane Okafor was 52, compact and precise, with the bearing of a woman who had spent 25 years in federal courtrooms and never once lost her footing. She wore a dark suit and carried a leather portfolio, and she crossed to the side of the room without hurrying or looking at anyone in particular, which somehow made everyone look at her. Her 2 colleagues took the door. The room was completely silent. Then the door opened a second time, and Andre Whitfield walked in. He was 30 years old, and he wore his old dress uniform, pressed and straight, the crease sharp, the shoes mirror bright. He had clearly spent time on it. He stood in the doorway a moment, and Elijah could see what it cost him to be there. In the set of his jaw, in the way his hands stayed perfectly still at his sides, through what had to be an enormous act of will. He took a place near the left wall. His eyes moved once across the room and settled on Wade Kroll, and something passed across Kroll's face he could not fully bury. A flash of something raw and ugly. There and gone. Elijah stepped to the lectern. Good morning. Before we begin, I have some introductions to make. He introduced Okafor and her colleagues, stated her title and division clearly. Without decoration, Okafor stepped forward. The Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, has opened a formal federal investigation into this station, she said, her voice measured and absolute. The investigation covers systematic civil rights violations, racially discriminatory conduct, targeted harassment of officers, suppression of formal complaints, assault under color of law, an obstruction of a federal civil rights inquiry. This investigation is now active and federal in jurisdiction. The lights hummed overhead. Nobody moved. Then Elijah did something no one expected. He stepped out from behind the lectern, into the open, into the middle of the room where every officer could see him. And he stood there for a moment. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet, and it carried into every corner. On Monday morning of this week, he said, I sat down to eat breakfast in this station. I was in plain clothes. Nobody knew who I was. And one of the officers in this room walked up to me, called me a filthy parasite, told me my kind comes in through the back door, and slammed my face into a row of lockers in front of an audience. He poured a drink over my head. He told me to clean it up on my knees, where I belonged. He let that sit. Nobody breathed, and then he put his hand around my throat, inside a police station, and told me my skin made him sick, and that if I didn't leave, he would put me down himself. He turned, slowly, and he looked directly at Cody Rourke. I want every officer in this room to understand exactly what happened that morning, because I think some of you have told yourselves it was a joke. It was not a joke. A man was assaulted and choked inside his own police station by other officers who believed, all the way down, that the color of his skin meant no one would ever hold them accountable. His voice did not rise. It did not have to. For 3 years and 7 months. That belief was correct. That ends today. The silence that followed was the loudest thing that room had ever held. Rourke had gone the color of ash. Pruitt was staring at the table like he could burn a hole through it. Ross had both hands pressed flat against the surface, and her shoulders were shaking. And she was not laughing now. Elijah turned back toward the front. Officer Whitfield, he said gently, would you like to say anything? Andre Whitfield stepped forward off the wall. He looked at Wade Kroll, and then he looked at the whole room, and his voice, when it came, was steady and clear, and left no room anywhere for misunderstanding. I did everything right, he said. Top of my class. I loved this job. I believed in it. He paused, and his jaw worked, and he held himself together, and they broke me anyway, one write-up at a time, because of the color of my skin, and they did it so quietly that for 3 years I thought maybe it really was my fault. He took a breath. I came back this morning because I have a son. He's 6 years old, and I need him to grow up in a city where this doesn't happen to the next one. The room was silent enough to hear the lights. Men who had laughed in the cafeteria on Monday sat with their eyes fixed on the table. Men who had signed Kroll's grievance stared at the wall like they were looking for a door that wasn't there. Nobody looked at Kroll. Kroll looked at nothing. Osei stepped forward, a single sheet in her right hand, moving with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who understood that speed would rob the moment of what it deserved. Sergeant Wade Kroll. The name landed like a stone dropped in still water. Kroll looked up. His face had gone somewhere. Faces go when every defense a man has built over 23 years collapses at once. Arlihid? Terrible blankness. Like a building the second after the walls come down. Effective immediately, Osei said, her voice filling every inch of the room. You are placed on administrative suspension, pending the outcome of the federal civil rights investigation opened this morning. You will surrender your badge and your sidearm before you leave this building. She stopped. The room waited. Kroll stood, slow and stiff. A man whose body had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He straightened his jacket with both hands. Abi. Something to do with them while the room watched. He unclipped the badge and held it in his palm a moment. 23 years. He set it on the table. And the sound, that small, flat, metallic click, was the loudest thing in the room. Several officers flinched without meaning to. He unholstered his sidearm, cleared it with the mechanical efficiency of long practice, and set it beside the badge. His hands were shaking, both of them, a fine tremor from wrist to fingertip that did not stop. He stepped back, straightened his jacket again, and walked toward the door. Back straight, face empty. He passed within 4 feet of Andre Whitfield, and Andre did not move, did not speak, stood absolutely still and watched him go with an expression that carried 3 years and 7 months of a man's life in it. The worst kind of quiet, the kind that settles over you when you have been told, over and over, by the sheer weight of institutional silence, that what happened to you did not matter. It mattered. The door swung shut behind Kroll, with a sound like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Okafor stepped forward and opened her portfolio. Officer Cody Rourke. Rourke looked up, and for one unguarded second, his face was completely open, stripped of the grin. The performance? Everything Monday morning had been built on. What was underneath was something much smaller than the man who had stood over a stranger with a can of energy drink and an audience at his back. You are formally charged with assault under color of law, aggravated assault by strangulation, conduct unbecoming an officer, and violation of the civil rights of a commanding officer, Okafor said, her voice neither rising nor falling. These charges are filed with the Department of Justice, supported by documented evidence, time-stamped records, eyewitness accounts, and the sworn statement of Captain Elijah Booker. Rourke's mouth opened. A protest. A reflex. The last automatic reach for a world where he could still talk his way out of something. Before you say anything, Okafor said, you should know, we recovered the metadata from your body-worn camera. It was manually disabled at 3 minutes past 8 on Monday morning. The switch held down for 3 seconds. Geolocated inside this building. 40 seconds before you walked over to that table. She let it sit. A malfunction doesn't choose its moment. Officer, a man does. You turned your camera off because you knew exactly what you were about to do. And you wanted no record of it. We have the record anyway. The look on her face stopped whatever he had been about to say cold. He stood, fumbled the badge pin loose on the 3rd try, and set it on the table with a hand that could not hold steady. He did not look at Elijah. He looked at nothing. The same vacancy that had descended on Kroll. He walked out. The door swung shut again. Pruitt and Ross came next. When Okafor spoke their names, Pruitt's jaw worked like a man trying to chew through something too hard for his teeth. He was informed that his signed statement, the one he had put his name to without a second thought, to help bury a commander who had done nothing wrong, had been flagged as potential evidence of coordinated retaliation against a commanding officer. Federal evidence now. In a federal case, his face fell through 3 expressions in 4 seconds. Ross said nothing at first. She sat with both hands flat on the table, pressing down like she needed to feel something solid, and stared at a fixed point on the wall. And she did not cry, though it was close. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, the only honest thing anyone from that table said all morning. I'm sorry. She was not looking at Elijah when she said it. She was looking at Andre. I laughed. I sat there and I laughed. And I knew, I always knew, nobody answered her. The bill had come, and there was no version of sorry that could pay it now. The consequences reached City Hall before noon. Councilman Voss's attorney called at 43 minutes past 10 with language that made Voss sit down mid-sentence. Federal obstruction. Not a city matter. Not something managed quietly through a funding committee over lunch. The internal affairs reassignment. The move Voss had been so proud of, so certain was clean, had been identified in the federal case file. And it was sitting in front of people who did not owe Harlan Voss anything at all. He canceled the forum and did not return calls for the rest of the day. By 11:15, the Deputy Commissioner's Office released a 4-sentence statement of full support for the Department of Justice investigation. Gordon Pike's name did not appear in it. The roll call room emptied slowly, like water finding its way out. Junior officers filed past Elijah with expressions he had not seen all week. Something open, cautious, but real. One stopped beside Andre Whitfield and said quietly, "I'm glad you came back." Andre looked at him. "Me too," he said. Renata Vaughn was last. She stood in the doorway and looked back. At the empty chairs, at the table that had held so many years of silence and complicity, at Elijah standing at the front with his uniform straight and the specific expression of a man who has finished something that needed finishing. Then she walked out into the hallway. And for the first time in 4 years at the East House, she did not brace herself as she went. She just walked. Later that afternoon, Elijah sat across from Osei. 2 coffees between them. The light coming through the blinds in long flat lines. There was one thing he needed to say first. By tomorrow, half this department is going to want me to run the investigation myself. My case, my documentation, my people. He turned his coffee a quarter turn on the desk. I'm the complainant. I'm a witness. Rourke put his hands on me. He put his hand around my throat. If I so much as sit in the room where this gets decided, every defense attorney in this city gets to stand up and say the whole thing was a man settling a personal score with a badge in his hand. He looked at her. And the worst part is, they'd have a point. You could sign a waiver, Osei said. Nobody would fight you. You've earned it. That's exactly why I won't. He said it without heat. If the only reason this ends cleanly is that the man it happened to outranked everyone in the building, then it didn't end cleanly. It just ended in my favor. Those aren't the same thing. He slid a single page across the desk. A formal recusão. I recuse myself. Fully. From the investigation and any disciplinary proceeding that comes out of it. It goes to Okafor's office and an independent panel. Not to me. This was never supposed to be my revenge. If it turns into that, I've become the thing I came here to end. Osei looked at the page a moment. She did not argue. She signed as witness and set it aside. Then she told him about the reform package. Mandatory body cameras for all in-station interactions. Not just street patrol. A restructured complaints process routed directly to an independent oversight board, bypassing the station chain of command entirely. A community accountability panel with real authority. A consent decree, negotiated with the Department of Justice, with a federal monitor attached. So none of it could be quietly unwound the moment the cameras left. The city wants you to chair the implementation committee, she said. They want it done right. And they know what right looks like now. He nodded slowly. She opened her portfolio and set a single page on the desk. 5 officers who had filed transfer requests out of this station withdrew them this week. She said, voluntarily, no prompting. He read the names, recognized everyone from orientation, from the careful, frightened way they had moved through this building at the start of the week. Renata Vaughn's name was on the list. He sat with that a moment. That, he said quietly, is the whole win. Right there. Osei looked at him. The federal case, the suspensions, the charges. He shook his head slightly. That's not the win. That's the consequence. He tapped the page once. The win is the 5 people who decided to stay. She was quiet a moment. Then she closed her portfolio and stood. Get some rest this weekend. Elijah. Yes, ma'am. She almost smiled. He found Renata at her desk 20 minutes later, the bullpen half full, and waited until she looked up. "My office. 2 minutes." She came in, and he closed the door and stayed standing. "What you did this week is formally noted in the federal record," he said. "Your cooperation, your courage, your judgment, all of it. On record." She absorbed that with a short nod. "There's something else." He held out a single sheet. "I'm recommending you for the detective track. The formal application." She took it and looked at it a long moment. "This is not a reward for this week. I've watched you for 5 days. The way you think, the way you move through a situation, the way you read people. You should have been on this track 2 years ago." She pressed her lips together. "My mother," she said finally, "is going to lose her mind." Something crossed Elijah's face that was almost, not quite, but almost a smile. Tell her she raised someone worth bragging about. The evening roll call that afternoon was quieter than Elijah had ever heard the building. Not empty. The phones still rang. The dispatch radio still crackled. But the particular noise that had defined the place all week, the performative loudness, the laughter that was really something else, wearing laughter's clothes, was gone. The air felt different, cleaner, like a window had been opened in a room, sealed a very long time. He stood at the front of the room as the evening watch filed in. The same room where, 3 days before, he had been the janitor. Nobody looked at twice. Sam Igioma sat near the front. Back straight. Camille Boyd. Gwen Alvarez. Renata Vaughn in the second row. The detective application folded in her breast pocket. And near the door, still in his old pressed dress uniform because he had not wanted to take it off yet, Andre Whitfield, who had a reinstatement meeting Monday, and a boy named Theo waiting at home to hear how it went. Elijah read the roster name by name, and one by one the officers answered, "Here," and the plain, ordinary word filled the room, like something being put back in a place it had been missing from for years. When roll call ended, he walked past the equipment lockers. Most of the row was labeled. Strips of tape. Printed nameplates. The small marks people leave to say this is mine. I belong here. All except one. 3 lockers, from the end, where the old label had been scraped half off years ago and never replaced. A ghost locker, the younger officers called it. Though none of them could have told you whose it used to be, Elijah stopped in front of it, took a fresh strip of tape and a marker from his pocket, and in clean, even block letters wrote a name and pressed it to the metal. Andre Whitfield. Then he stepped back and looked at it a moment. Outside the windows, Calder City moved through its Friday afternoon, unaware, unhurried, carrying on. And inside the East House, something that had been broken for a very long time quietly, finally, began to heal. It ends well. This one. There's a federal case. A consent decree. A good man back in uniform. And a name pressed onto a locker that had been empty for 3 years and 7 months. It ends well because the man they shoved into that row of lockers, the man they choked and told to get on his knees, happened to be the one man in the city they could not touch. The next man they do it to might not be. So here is the question worth sitting with. It was never really about the drink, or the lockers, or even the hand around his throat. It was about a room full of people who watched it happen and decided, one after another, that laughing along was safer than standing up. What would it have taken? Unperson. One word. On that first Monday morning, to change how the whole thing went. If this story meant something to you, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. take care of each other. And never assume the quiet man in the room is the one with the least power. Sometimes he's the one holding all of it.